Nobody tells you the most dangerous thing about healing. They give you the vocabulary: trauma bond, narcissistic supply, gaslighting, love bombing, and you learn to wield these terms like weapons against a person who once dismantled your sense of reality. You build a fortress of understanding around your wound, label the aggressor, and wait for the relief that is supposed to follow accurate diagnosis. But the relief does not come. Or it comes partially, the way painkillers address symptoms but leave the fracture untouched beneath the skin. Something keeps pulling. Something beneath the labels, beneath the justified anger, beneath the certainty that you were the victim and he was the villain, refuses to settle. Carl Gustav Jung, writing from the depths of a tradition that refused to simplify the human soul into comfortable categories, would have recognized that unresolved tension immediately. He would have called it the voice of the shadow, not the narcissist's shadow, but yours, speaking from the cellar of the psyche where everything you have refused to confront waits with inhuman patience for the day you are finally brave enough to descend. And what this exploration will reveal is something that may feel like a betrayal of everything you have been taught about narcissistic abuse. The narcissist was never your enemy. He was your shadow's messenger, sent not to destroy you, but to deliver a letter you have been avoiding your entire life. Before the resistance rises, and it will rise because the ego protects its narratives the way a mother bear protects her cubs, understand that this is not a statement about justice. The narcissist's cruelty is real. The damage is real. The manipulation, the erasure of boundaries, the systematic reduction of another person's reality to serve a fragile ego. None of this is excused, minimized, or romanticized by what follows. What follows is not about him. It has never been about him. The deepest work of the human psyche is always, without exception, about the relationship between the conscious self and the vast unconscious territory that lies beneath it. And Jung spent his life mapping that territory with the precision of a cartographer who understood that the most treacherous landscapes are the ones we carry inside ourselves. Today, we are going to walk through the doorway that most psychology refuses to open. The doorway that leads from the question, "Why did he do this to me?" to the far more dangerous, far more liberating question, "What was my unconscious trying to show me through him?" Jung's concept of the shadow is perhaps the most misappropriated idea in modern self-help culture. It has been flattened into a weekend workshop exercise, a journaling prompt, a hashtag, but in its original depth, the shadow is nothing less than the counterpart to your entire conscious identity. It is the negative image of your persona, containing every quality, every impulse, every capacity that you have systematically disowned in order to become the person you believe yourself to be. The shadow, Jung wrote, is that hidden, repressed, for the most part inferior and guilt-laden personality whose ultimate ramifications reach back into the realm of our animal ancestors. This is not a metaphor for your bad habits. This is the totality of your unlived life, the roads not taken, the emotions not expressed, the power not claimed, the darkness not acknowledged. And it operates with autonomous force in the unconscious, shaping your choices, your attractions, and your repetitive patterns with a precision that would terrify you if you could see it clearly. Now consider the empath. Not the social media archetype of the empath, not the self-identified, highly sensitive person who wears the label like a badge of spiritual superiority, but the actual psychological configuration of the individual whose identity has been organized, from earliest childhood, around the capacity to feel, to absorb, to accommodate, and to heal the emotional states of others. This configuration did not arise in a vacuum. It was forged in the crucible of a childhood environment where emotional survival required the development of an extraordinarily sensitive radar for the internal states of unpredictable caregivers. The child who would become the empath learned, before language, before conscious memory, that her safety depended on her ability to detect shifts in mood, to anticipate needs, to regulate the emotional atmosphere of her household, by becoming a vessel for the feelings that the adults around her could not contain. She became, in Jungian terms, the carrier of the family's collective emotional shadow, the one who processes what everyone else refuses to feel. This early adaptation, and it is an adaptation, not an inherent virtue, produces a persona of remarkable consistency. The empath's public self is organized around warmth, generosity, patience, forgiveness, and emotional availability. These are not false qualities. They are genuine expressions of a highly developed relational capacity, but they are incomplete. They represent one half of a whole human being, and the other half, the half that contains the empath's aggression, her selfishness, her hunger for power, her capacity for coldness, her need to be served rather than to serve, her rage at the unfairness of a childhood that conscripted her into emotional labor before she was old enough to consent. All of this has been consigned to the shadow. Not destroyed, consigned, stored, kept alive in the darkness, where it accumulates energy with each passing year, waiting for its moment of expression. Jung articulated a principle that operates with the reliability of a natural law. What is unconscious is projected. The qualities we cannot see in ourselves we will see in others, not randomly, with surgical precision. The unconscious does not project onto neutral targets. It selects the target that most precisely embodies the disowned quality, the target that carries on its surface the very thing we have locked in our cellar. Projections change the world into the replica of one's own unknown face, Jung wrote, and this sentence contains the entire mechanism of the empath-narcissist bond. When the empath encounters the narcissist, she does not encounter a random predator. She encounters the living embodiment of everything she has forbidden herself to be. Someone who takes without guilt, demands without apology, occupies the center of attention without the crushing anxiety that she has been trained to feel whenever she takes up space. And the unconscious, recognizing its own reflection in another body, generates a response that the conscious mind interprets as attraction, as chemistry, as destiny. But here is where the conventional narrative and the Jungian narrative diverge in a way that changes everything. The conventional narrative says, the narcissist targeted you because you are empathic, and your empathy made you vulnerable. This is true at the surface level, but it stops at the surface, and surfaces do not heal. The Jungian narrative says, the narcissist appeared in your life because your shadow summoned him, not consciously, not deliberately, but through the autonomous operation of the unconscious, which will always seek to bring its contents into awareness by creating external situations that mirror internal realities. The narcissist is not a random intruder in the empath's psychological landscape. He is a figure conjured by the empath's own depths, carrying a message that the conscious mind does not want to receive. You are more than your kindness, and until you claim the rest of yourself, you will keep creating situations that force you to confront it. This is the concept Jung called Enantiodromia, the tendency of any extreme psychological position to eventually produce its opposite. The empath who has identified exclusively with light, with giving, with the selfless dissolution of her own needs into the needs of others, will inevitably attract the force that embodies the opposite. The narcissist, who has identified exclusively with self-interest, with taking, with the elevation of his own needs above all others. They are not opposites in the way that enemies are opposites. They are opposites in the way that two halves of a single coin are opposites, each incomplete without the other, each carrying the disowned portion of the other's psyche. The empath carries the narcissist's exiled vulnerability. The narcissist carries the empath's exiled power. And the relationship between them, for all its devastation, is the unconscious attempting to force a confrontation with wholeness, an integration that, if achieved, would render the destructive dynamic unnecessary. Jung used the term the transcendent function to describe the psyche's capacity to reconcile opposing forces through the emergence of a third position that includes but transcends both poles. In the context of the empath-narcissist dynamic, the transcendent function is the faculty that would allow the empath to hold both her genuine compassion and her genuine capacity for self-interest, both her authentic warmth and her authentic anger, both her desire to give and her equally legitimate desire to receive. But the transcendent function cannot operate when one pole of the opposition is entirely unconscious. As long as the empath's shadow, her power, her rage, her self-priority, remains locked in the basement, the transcendent function has nothing to work with. There is no synthesis possible between a conscious position and an unconscious one. The unconscious content must first be made conscious, and the method the psyche uses to force this process is projection. Specifically, projection onto the figure who embodies the disowned quality most completely. Consider for a moment the precise nature of what the empath finds irresistible about the narcissist in the early stages of the relationship. It is not his cruelty, that comes later, after the projection has been established and the unconscious bond is too deep to sever easily. What draws her initially is his apparent freedom from the constraints she has internalized, his confidence, his refusal to apologize for taking up space, his ability to command a room without the paralyzing self-doubt that accompanies her every attempt at visibility, his unapologetic selfishness, which registers to her unconscious not as a pathology, but as a liberation, a living demonstration that it is possible to prioritize the self without the world collapsing, without love being withdrawn, without the catastrophe that her childhood programmed her to expect whenever she dared to put her own needs first. She is not attracted to his disorder. She is attracted to the shadow quality he carries, the quality she has spent her entire life suppressing, and the intensity of the attraction is proportional to the degree of suppression. This is why the empath does not simply admire the narcissist from a distance, the way she might admire a painting or a performance. She falls into him. She loses herself. She experiences a pull that feels existential, as though separation from him would mean separation from some essential part of herself. And she is correct. Not about him, but about the dynamic. She would be separating from her projected shadow, and the ego experiences the withdrawal of a projection with the same anguish it experiences the loss of an actual limb. The projection is her power, her assertiveness, her right to exist unapologetically. She placed it inside him, and now she believes she needs him in order to access it. This is the trap. Not his trap, though he certainly benefits from it and often consciously maintains it. This is the trap of her own unconscious, constructed not to punish her but to force her, eventually, to reclaim what she placed outside herself. Jung described dreams as the small hidden door in the deepest and most intimate sanctum of the soul, and the narcissistic relationship functions like a waking dream from which the empath must eventually interpret the symbolism. The narcissist in this dream is not a person, he is a symbol. He is the animus in its most primitive, undifferentiated form, the inner masculine that the empath has never developed, the assertive, boundary-setting, self-prioritizing force that her conscious personality has no relationship with. When the animus is unconscious and undeveloped, it possesses the woman from within, not as a companion, but as a tyrant. It speaks to her in the voice of brutal self-criticism, in the conviction that she is not enough, in the compulsion to earn love through sacrifice. And it appears in her external world as the figure of the dominating, controlling man, the narcissist, who enacts outwardly what the undeveloped animus enacts inwardly. She does not recognize the connection because the projection obscures it. She sees him as the source of her suffering, when in fact he is the mirror, reflecting the suffering that was already present in her relationship with her own inner masculine. There is a moment in the dissolution of any empath-narcissist bond that Jung would have recognized as the beginning of individuation, the moment when the empath's pain becomes too great for the projection to sustain. The narcissist's behavior escalates to a point where the idealized image can no longer be maintained, and the discrepancy between who he is and who she needs him to be becomes impossible to ignore. This moment is excruciating. It feels like the death of love. But what is actually dying is not love. It is the projection. The screen on which she had painted her own unlived qualities is being torn down, and what is revealed behind it is not emptiness, but the raw, undeniable necessity of developing those qualities in herself. Jung called this the withdrawal of projections, and he considered it one of the most difficult but essential tasks of psychological maturation. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, he wrote, but by making the darkness conscious. The darkness he refers to is not the narcissist's darkness. It is the darkness the empath has been carrying within herself and refusing to claim. The withdrawal of projections is not an intellectual exercise. It cannot be accomplished by simply understanding the concept. It is a lived process that unfolds through suffering, through the collapse of cherished illusions, through the terrifying encounter with the parts of the self that the persona was designed to conceal. When the empath begins to withdraw her projection from the narcissist, she must face the woman she has been hiding, the woman who is not always kind, not always patient, not always forgiving, the woman who has legitimate rage at having been used, the woman who has a hunger for recognition that she is denied in order to maintain her identity as the selfless giver, the woman who is capable of manipulation, yes, even manipulation, when her survival demands it. This is the shadow, and meeting it face to face is the most courageous act a human being can undertake, because it requires the dismantling of the very identity that has provided safety, belonging, and a sense of moral superiority for an entire lifetime. But the shadow is not only darkness. Jung was insistent on this point, and it is the point that most popular interpretations miss entirely. The shadow contains what he called the gold, the repressed positive qualities that were as threatening to the family system as the negative ones. For the empath, the gold in the shadow is often extraordinary. Creative power that was shamed as selfishness, intellectual ambition that was labeled as cold, sexual vitality that was condemned as inappropriate, leadership capacity that was dismissed as domineering, and most crucially, the ability to say no, the ability to draw a boundary, to refuse a demand, to walk away from a situation that does not serve her growth, without the devastating guilt that currently accompanies every act of self-preservation. This gold was not lost, it was hidden. And the narcissist, by embodying a distorted version of these qualities, served as a clue, a dark, painful, devastating clue, pointing the empath toward the treasure buried in her own underground. Jung's concept of complexes becomes particularly illuminating here. A complex, in Jungian psychology, is an emotionally charged cluster of images and associations that operates autonomously within the unconscious, often hijacking behavior, perception, and emotional response without the individual's awareness or consent. The empath typically carries what might be called a savior complex, not in the casual sense of the term, but as an actual psychological structure organized around the belief that her value is contingent upon her capacity to heal, rescue, and transform others. This complex did not emerge from virtue. It emerged from necessity, from the childhood recognition that the only position of relative safety in an emotionally chaotic household was the position of the healer, the mediator, the one who could fix what the adults had broken. The narcissist activates this complex with devastating precision because the narcissist presents himself as someone who needs saving. His woundedness, which is real, even if he uses it manipulatively, speaks directly to the empath's complex, which responds with an almost involuntary surge of purpose, meaning, and vitality. This is the mechanism by which the empath becomes trapped, not by the narcissist's cleverness alone, but by the autonomous operation of her own complex. The savior complex provides a sense of identity, of worth, of meaning so powerful that relinquishing it feels like psychological death. To stop trying to save the narcissist is, for the empath, to confront the question that the complex exists to avoid. Who am I if I am not the one who heals? What is my value if I am not useful? What remains of me when I stop sacrificing? These are shadow questions, questions that the conscious mind experiences as existential threats because answering them requires the complete reorganization of the personality around a new center of gravity. Jung called this reorganization the death and rebirth of the ego, and he understood that it is the most painful and the most necessary transformation a human being can undergo. The narcissist, unwittingly, serves as the catalyst for this transformation. Not through his kindness, he has little to offer on that front. Through his relentless consumption of the empath's energy, he creates a crisis that no amount of giving can resolve. He presents a wound that no amount of healing can close. He demands a sacrifice that no amount of love can satisfy. And in doing so, he exhausts the empath's savior complex to the point of collapse. This collapse, this moment when the empath finally admits that she cannot save him, that all her love was insufficient, that the bottomless pit of his need will consume her entirely if she does not stop pouring herself into it. This collapse is the doorway. Not the doorway to recovery in the conventional therapeutic sense, though that may follow. The doorway to individuation, to the lifelong process of becoming psychologically whole by integrating the conscious and unconscious aspects of the self into a single, unified, authentic personality. What does the empath look like on the other side of this integration? She does not look like a harder version of herself. She does not look like someone who has armored her heart against future invasion. She does not look like the woman who now knows the red flags and will never be fooled again. These are surface adaptations, useful perhaps, but insufficient for genuine transformation. The integrated empath looks like someone who has expanded. She has not lost her capacity for deep feeling. That remains intact because it is authentically hers. But she has added to it something that was previously missing, the capacity for equally deep self-regard. She can feel another person's pain without automatically assuming responsibility for it. She can love without dissolving. She can give without depleting. She can be present to suffering without being consumed by it, because she has developed an internal counterweight, the reclaimed shadow qualities of assertiveness, boundary, anger, and self-priority that keeps her centered in herself even as she extends herself toward others. This is what Jung meant by the coniunctio oppositorum, the conjunction of opposites, the alchemical marriage of light and shadow within a single psyche. It is not the triumph of one over the other. It is not the empath learning to be selfish or the narcissist learning to be kind. It is the emergence of a third thing, a wholeness that contains both poles without being dominated by either. Jung borrowed this concept from the alchemical tradition, where the marriage of opposites, the king and queen, the sun and moon, the sulfur and mercury, was understood as the supreme achievement of the opus, the great work. In psychological terms, the great work is individuation, and the empath, who has passed through the fire of a narcissistic relationship and emerged with her shadow integrated, has accomplished something that most human beings never achieve. She has made the unconscious conscious, and in doing so, she has freed herself from the compulsive repetition of patterns that previously governed her life from beneath the threshold of awareness. There is a final Jungian concept that deserves attention here, because it illuminates why this process is not simply personal, but carries a significance that extends beyond the individual. Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, the deep stratum of the psyche that is shared by all human beings and populated by archetypes, primordial patterns of experience that shape human behavior across cultures and centuries. The empath-narcissist dynamic is not a modern invention. It is an archetypal pattern, a variation on the ancient theme of the healer and the wounded king, the maiden and the beast, the light-bearer and the shadow. Every culture has its version of this story, because the story is not about two types of people. It is about two aspects of the human soul that have been separated and must be reunited for wholeness to be achieved. When the empath integrates her shadow, she is not only healing herself, she is participating in the larger work of human psychological evolution, the work that Jung believed was the central task of the modern age, when the old religious and mythological containers for the shadow have lost their power, and the individual must undertake alone what was previously accomplished through collective ritual and myth. So here is the message that the narcissist carried, encrypted in cruelty, encoded in manipulation, disguised in the language of love and its destruction. You are more than you know. You are more than your kindness, more than your empathy, more than your willingness to sacrifice yourself on the altar of another person's need. You contain a force that you have been taught to fear, a force of self-assertion, of boundary, of righteous anger, of unapologetic ambition. And until you claim that force as your own, it will continue to appear in your life in distorted form, wearing the face of the people who use it against you. The narcissist was never your enemy. He was the shadow's messenger, delivering a summons you did not request but desperately needed to receive. The question is not whether you will answer. The shadow has infinite patience. It will send another messenger, and another, and another, until the message is received. The question is whether you will answer now, whether you will descend into the cellar of your own psyche, open the letter, and discover that everything you have been searching for in another person has been waiting, in the dark, for the courage of your attention. Jung wrote, near the end of his life, that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. He did not say this to discourage the attempt. He said it to honor the magnitude of the endeavor. To accept yourself completely means to accept the parts that contradict your most cherished self-image. For the empath, it means accepting that she is not only light. For the narcissist, should he ever undertake his own journey, it means accepting that he is not only strength. But this text is not for the narcissist. It is for the empath who has been told, by every self-help book and every recovery forum and every well-meaning friend, that her only task is to identify the narcissist and stay away. That is not wrong, it is simply incomplete. The complete task is to understand why the narcissist was necessary, what function he served in the larger architecture of the empath's individuation, and to use that understanding not to forgive him, not to return to him, but to become the version of herself that no longer requires his presence in order to encounter her own power. That woman does not need to be warned about narcissists. She does not need a checklist of red flags. She does not need armor. She is whole, and the whole cannot be preyed upon, because there is nothing missing in her that another person could promise to provide. The door is open, the letter is waiting, and the woman who reads it will never be the same, not because she has been broken, but because she has finally, irreversibly, been made complete.